My name is Chris Mitchell with Inflow Communications. I'm the Chief Technology Officer. Thanks for joining our 911 and emergency notification webinar today. If you're new to our webinar series or haven't had a chance to hit our website lately, we have a couple of upcoming webinars you can see on my screen here. We have how to troubleshoot ECC with the diagnostic console coming up next week, and we also have the creative ways to use IVR for your contact center customers. So feel free to hit those two. We just planned out our webinars for November and December, so those should be getting on our website here pretty quick. So feel free to to pay attention to those, and you'll have some opportunities to register for a few more upcoming webinars through the end of the year. All right, here's my quick agenda here. So I'll do a quick introduction on who is Inflow Communications, and I'll jump right in and talk about 911 with ShoreTel, Mitel. Then I'll hit a couple slides on an emergency notification. If you need a little bit more than just 911 capabilities, I'll talk about some options from ShoreTel, Mitel, and some from some third parties. And then I'll save a little bit of time for question and answer at the end. So if you do have any questions throughout the webinar, feel free to post them in the question section. I'll try to answer those as I go through the webinar. And if I can't get to them during each section, I'll save some time at the end to answer them. And in the rare occasion that I can't answer one on the webinar, I'll follow up via email to answer those questions. So we also make this recording available to everybody who's on the call. If you have other employees on your team that you might want to make this recording available to, you can reach out to us, and we send a link out automatically a few days afterwards with the link to the recording, so you can watch it back or send the link over to another employee. So. All right, so who is Inflow Communication? If you're newer to our webinar series or you're already existing customer, then you probably already know, but we're a unified communications and contact center company. That's all we do. We don't try to do IT work and sell everything under the sun. We really work on, focus on phone systems and contact center solutions. We're a Mitel ShoreTel Platinum partner, which is the highest level. We're RingCentral delivery partners, which means for customers that are maybe just looking for a different cloud solution, with RingCentral, we can install and support and train on RingCentral. And we're a Genesys Pure Cloud Gold partner, meaning that we can install and support Genesys Pure Cloud for another cloud contact center options for customers. We have just over 50 employees in 10 different states, so we're a nationwide company. We support customers with locations all over the U.S., even some worldwide locations. We currently have over 200,000, ShoreTel, Mitel phones and endpoints that we support, over 800 customers. One thing that's different, we really focus on customer experience. If you hit our website, you can look at our live stats. How long does it take us to answer a call on average? What's our average, first response time on tickets? What's our customer satisfaction score? We even post comments from some of our, from our customers on, on our website, when they leave comments about a case and everything like that. So we try to be very transparent when it comes to customer support. Our customers span all kinds of different verticals, and markets and everything like that. Here's a couple of our bigger marquee accounts that you probably have heard of before. All right, and with that quick intro, I'm going to jump right in, and we're going to start off talking about 911. And this is, important for customers as they're expanding. If you have a single site or multi-site, phone system, it's really important to understand how 911 works. And when you're switching, maybe you're considering switching to SIP or switching carriers, understanding the what are the ins and outs of 911 and what are your options when it comes to 911. So we're going to start off with just kind of the overview, of what is 911. So E911 and Enhanced 911 has two different parts. So your phone system controls the outbound caller ID, and I would say this is probably 95% accurate. In some cases, your carrier is overriding your caller ID, and they're so they're just ignoring what the phone system sends them. But that's a pretty small amount of customers where the carrier is overriding caller ID. So usually we can control the phone number going outbound, but then the carrier controls the address associated with that phone number. So when we send, 555-1212 to the carrier, they look it up in their little database and it says, oh, that is 123 Main Street in New York City, New York. And they'll provide that address information over, to the 911 dispatcher. Number two, the phone system can route 911 calls out any trunk from any site. So this is one unique thing. Least cost routing in the ShoreTel system has a very unique setup, and you can only send calls that are local out of a trunk in in Alabama. But when we hit 911, you can't restrict 911 calls. We can put some preferences on it, but every single trunk can place 911 calls out. When we get into SIP-based, trunk groups, 911 call centers can't always dispatch remote locations. So if we end up having to send a 911 call out of Atlanta, Georgia, but I'm sitting maybe, I'm in Salt Lake City, Utah, the Atlanta 911 dispatcher can't dispatch, ambulance and fire truck in Salt Lake City, for me. So we have to pay attention to that as we're routing out, and if we're using a SIP service, we might want to look for a company that has a national dispatch, center, or we need to make sure that, that we can, maybe look at some local trunks in each of the cities or something like that, because, so we can dispatch properly. Remote users, these are, either anybody using a soft phone or just maybe a VPN phone or an SSL phone. These are the ones that usually cause us the most amount of problems, because anytime they place a call out, it's not going to go to a dispatch center that's, for their location. If they happen to be sitting, on the beach in Hawaii, but but our main location is in San Francisco, and they place a call using a soft phone or something, we're going to hit the dispatch center in San Francisco almost every time, and they're not going to be able to dispatch, so for those users. So we typically recommend you train your users for soft phones and remote phones. Place a 911 call with a cell phone. It's going to geolocate and get connected to the correct location, where the soft phone and stuff is rarely ever going to be connected to the right location unless we have a national dispatch center from a carrier. Number 5, if you have analog lines, a lot of our school district customers use analog lines still for 911 purposes, and the main reason is that analog lines are hard-coded with an address. I can't control caller ID number or anything on those analog lines, so the carrier simply looks at what line the call came from, grabs the address that's hard-coded in where that line is installed, and it sends over to the dispatch center. So analog lines usually are the most reliable way to make sure the 911 dispatcher gets the correct address, when that call comes through. All right, so there's 6 different ways that we can control 911 inside your ShoreTel either 14.2 Connect, system. So we're gonna start off on the very top, and the one thing to note is, certain methods override other methods here. So if as we go down, each of the methods below it is an option to override the option above it. So if we do option number 6, everything we did 1 through 5 doesn't matter, because 6 is going to override everything else. So option 1 is at the user level. In the user group, we can set the caller ID field, for each user to be the 911 caller ID. So this is typically, like you notice on the right, is it's not usually recommended for use, because the main reason is a salesperson might have an 800 number as their caller ID, set up or something like that. So we don't typically recommend using the caller ID field, because that can be set to pretty much any phone number that you own, so might not be very relevant for 911 dispatching. Our second option is to use a user's DID. So if my DID is 5551212, great. Let's grab that DID and let's send it out to the carrier. Again, not typically recommended for use. The main reason is if you have employees that move between sites, or move between locations. If I go from one site to another, but I move my extension with me and I place a 911 call, my DID is still going to go out, and that might be tied to to a different location. So if you have users who don't necessarily move around between locations, the DID option might be a good fit for them. Option number 3 is, I would say, we recommend probably 85% of the time, and so you can build an IP phone address map inside of ShoreTel. If you're looking in the director, it's under phones, and then underneath your IP phones, you'll see the IP phone address map. What this allows us to do is when a 911 call gets placed from a phone, the system says, oh, what's the IP address of the phone that's placing the 911 call? Oh, I can see it's 192.168.1.100. Great, let's look up that IP address in our table. And it says, oh, this IP address is registered to this 911 caller ID, 555-1212. Great, let's send that to the, to the 911 dispatch center so that they have the right address. The main reason we recommend this setting is that you can't fake the IP address of a phone. Nothing you can do. If I move a phone between one building and another building, the phone can't control the network. So the network, sets, if it's DHCP, it's going to set the IP address. If I've hard-coded an IP address on a phone and I move it, that phone's not going to work. So you can't fake an IP address. The network's, switch is programmed to configure that. So you can do different floors, different buildings, different locations, can all be set up with different IP address ranges and the correct caller IDs for those ranges. So that's the preferred method. We have 3 more options, and just note, remember, if you use any of the other options and we set them up, it's going to override the other options. So number 4 is on your ShoreGear switches, you can set a caller ID for 911 purposes. And any call that goes through that switch for placing of 911 is going to override the other option and just set a caller ID for 911 purposes. Option number 5 is at the site level. So 4 is from the switch, 5 is down to the site level. So the site might have 4 or 5 switches associated with it, and you could set a caller ID for every call that goes through that site. So, I place 911 call, it looks up what site that switch is associated with, and it overwrites the caller ID and sends it out to the 911 dispatcher. So this one works fairly well for for smaller offices that every single office has their has their own dial tone and stuff like that. If you have remote users or smaller, some offices working off of another site's dial tone, that's some of the issues that you have with using number 5. Number 6 is to use the phone number on the trunk side of things. So, or having your carrier override, the caller ID from a trunk level. This is usually the least recommended option, because if we do least cost routing, or maybe one site's dial tone goes down and we have to route the call out another site's dial tone, we don't want that trunk to overwrite every single caller ID for 911 purposes with with that location's phone number, because it's going to pretty much guarantee that any call from from a different site that comes through that trunk is going to have the incorrect 911 caller ID. So in some cases that is a requirement. We've had some smaller carriers who only allow their caller IDs to pass outbound, so we have had to use option 6 in a few cases, but it's pretty rare that we use the trunk overriding for 911 caller IDs. So kind of recap, option number 3 is the recommended method. We're using do 911 based on the IP address of the phones. Option 2 is probably used, I would say, second most, and then the third option is either number 4 or number 5, handling it from a switch or site level. That would typically be the third most used setup. All right, so now let's talk about routing rules. So on the right-hand side, you can kind of see this is an older image that I pulled, but it shows that we have a few different pieces that go into just determining the routing rules and what happens on a 911 call before it goes outbound. So the first thing is trunks at the same site as a user will always be used first. So if I'm in Salt Lake City, my Salt Lake City trunks are going to be used first for 911 caller ID. No matter what, there's no waiting or anything I can do that will make my trunks, in Salt Lake, be used second. So if they're available, it's always going to be used first, and that's where, like I said, our school district customers put an analog line at each school, so that's used as the very first option for 911 caller ID. The second thing is each trunk needs 911 enabled, and the user needs permission to use that trunk. So if we have a PRI in Atlanta, Georgia, and I don't have access to that Atlanta, Georgia trunk, I can't use it for 911 purposes for backup. as a backup option. So those are the two things. Is there's a permission set in the trunk group for 911 to allow 911 calls, and then my user group needs permission to use that trunk. If a site has multiple trunks that have 911 enabled, then we get down to least cost routing. It's going to determine, okay, which trunk is set up to be preferred, first, second, third, fourth, whatever. In that case, if you haven't changed anything in your least cost routing or weighting yourself, or your partner hasn't changed it, SIP will always be used first, PRI will be used second, and then analog lines will be used third. And that's just the default weighting is from least cost that ShoreTel has built into the system. So if we have multiple trunks, we may need, and we want to prefer one over the other, we can weight them. If we do have multiple, and say, okay, let's use analog first, and then use SIP second, and then use PRI third. That is an option. We can do 911 weighting or prioritization. A 911 call will not use a remote site's trunk unless the parent as proxy is enabled. So if I'm in Salt Lake and my parent site is Atlanta, Georgia, and I want to be able to use their 911 trunks, I need to check the parent as proxy checkbox inside of my Salt Lake City trunk, inside my site. Otherwise, I can't use another site's 911 calls or 911 trunks. So that's a setting just to stop somebody from from utilizing another site's 911 in trunks for like long distance purposes, unless you want to approve that. So just a simple checkbox that we need to make sure that we have enabled. The Inflow staff can add custom trunk weighting. Like I said, if we want to use an analog line over a PRI, we can we can do that. There's a nice little code that ShoreTel built years ago that allows us to put a code into into a trunk and say this is the preferred 911 trunk for this site. So if a user dials 911, the system will wait several seconds before connecting the call. And this is to prevent missed dials and something like that. So if you just walk over to a phone and you hit 911, it's going to wait typically 1.5 to 3 seconds, depending on what your setup is, to make sure that you weren't just dialing a 9 and then a 1 for a long distance call and you forgot you dial 1 and dial it again. So if users want to immediately dial 1, they can dial a 9 and then 911, and it'll immediately dial the call. But either one will work. There's a slight delay when you don't do a 9 before the 911, in the system. So that kind of hits the bottom two options there. Both of them will work. One just has a delay to make sure that that's actually what they were meaning to dial in the system. We've had some customers who too many 911 calls were dialed on accident, so they actually changed their outside line from a 9 to an 8. So that they dial 8 to get an outside line, and then they weren't dialing 911 on accident if they were trying to call long distance or international and misdialed. So we have seen that definitely a few different times. All right, let me look through from a question standpoint. I don't see any questions that I didn't answer in going through the rules and the other ones. So if you do have a couple questions, so like I said, feel free if you have any other questions that I didn't answer yet, put them, feel free to put them in the questions, section. So we do have some customers that, just basic 911 call, calling like this doesn't solve what they need, or doesn't give them maybe the internal notifications and stuff they need. So typically what this happens when that happens, we then look at pairing our 911 with an emergency notification option. So emergency notification is useful if you're a single location or if you're multiple locations. We have customers that are in the medical field that use it, all kinds of different fields. It doesn't really matter what type of business you're in. You can utilize an emergency notification app if you want to provide communications to your internal teams about a 911 call or a different event that occurred. So there's a couple of different options. So ShoreTel Mitel has what they call emergency notification. That does some screen pops. You can see some screen pops here, so you can install a little application on desktops, and when a 911 call is placed, it pops up this red alert and gives the information about the 911 call, who placed it, what was the location, what's the date and time of the call and everything, so that when the ambulance gets to the location, you know exactly who placed the call, you know, and where to direct them to. With the emergency notification that that ShoreTel Mitel has, you can also use it for other things. You can use it for like a cleanup request, a code blue for medical, a teacher assist for a school district. You know, we have one that uses for a janitor, cleanup. So you can kind of configure different alerts, and you can do screen pops. We can do overhead, paging alerts. We can do phone calls. We can do emails. With a phone call, we could do text to speech. So if we need to just call cell phone numbers or physical phone numbers, we can let them know, hey, so and so called 911, or so and so requested a code blue or a cleanup request. So you can do outbound calls, emails, overhead paging, and screen pops. So there's a few different options you can do with the ShoreTel emergency notification. Typically with that is you can do up to 50 different alerts or 50 different users. So I can screen pop on 50 workstations, and I can also do 50 phone calls out to cell phones to let them know that a 911 call or a different alert was requested. The other options, if you're looking maybe for something more more robust or a little bit different, is there's a couple of different third-party integrations. Synapse and West Communications both offer different emergency notification third-party systems. West gives you a 911 gateway that you put on site, and you can actually map all of your 911 calls down to the network switch level and port, and provide exact information to the 911 dispatcher. This call came in from building 1, floor 2, cubicle 8, or the corner, conference room. So with the West Emergency Gateway, you track all the way down to the network switch level, and you can provide that information to the dispatchers. The Synapse application is I would say, is similar to the ShoreTel emergency notification. It just gives you a little bit more capability. It's not limited to 50 notifications, but you can do a screen pop, you can do phone calls, emails, text messages, overhead paging alerts. But it's just for bigger notifications. With Synapse, you can alert like I think up to 5,000 phones or something like that on alert. So it doesn't limit it down to say 50 users in that case. So it just gives you another option. We have a lot of school districts who use Synapse because it integrates with like overhead with Bell system, with Bell schedules and everything like that. Just gives another option for utilizing third-party alerts. And I think they even have a mobile app now that you can do some mobile app alerting. So a few different options when it comes to 911 or to emergency notifications if you want to take your 911 kind of to the next level. All right, we do have I see a couple questions came in here. I have one that says, we have our own campus police department, and our campus 911 calls are sent directly to dispatch. Is there a good way to integrate or maintain office locations associated with the phone so dispatch actually gets the office location of the student faculty calling 911 from a campus phone? So let me go back a few slides here. If we're using emergency notification, you'll notice that there's a caller location field where it says music building, room 207. Using the emergency notification app, we actually pull that caller location information from the user's profile, the extension profile in ShoreTel. If you're looking in a ShoreTel system, there's a field called jack number right underneath the phone assignment, and that field we can put information into it, and that's where we can pull that caller location is from the jack number field. So we can populate information about each individual extension, and then we can display that information in in this pop-up. So if we loaded this software on your campus police, and somebody were to call 911, we would have the ability to screen pop and give information about where that call is coming from. The West Communications Gateway also has the ability to place a 911 call and conference in a different user. So you could actually place a 911 call and conference in your campus police at the exact same time into the call. So that is another option that we've had a couple customers request when placing 911 calls is to be able to conference in another party. So there's a couple different options that you can, that we can do with that. And, if you want to have a call about that, Robert, I'd be more than happy to, to hop on a call and go through, exactly how your setup is handling it. And and talk through different options. So you can, if you have an account manager or CSM, you can reach out to them. You can also send us an email at contact, and we can schedule a call to help with that. Let's see, one other question here. When utilizing 911, can you place the call from a mobile app? Good question. So if any of you've upgraded to Connect, you know that you get the mobile app for free as part of the Connect upgrade. So I've tested this actually for a customer from the mobile app. If I call 911, it will place the call through the ShoreTel system. They're trying to figure out a way that you can restrict this, and I haven't seen if they've gave this option yet, but it did work on it. They're trying to modify the call routing rules to disable a 911 call and force it out the cellular network instead. But as of right now, when I look at the routing rules for mobility, I can still build 911 into the system and allow it as a good call on that. So it will go through to the ShoreTel phone system, and the caller ID that goes out is based on the headquarters location. So if I call 911 from the mobile app, it will send the main location's caller ID outbound to the dispatcher, and they will see the address and everything of the main location. They will not even know that I placed the call from a mobile app. So definitely training, a training area that we try to emphasize when we're training on the mobile app is to, if you're going to call 911 from your phone, open up your iPhone or Android dialer. Don't open up the Mitel mobile app to place a 911 call, because they will not get the right address of your location. All right, well, I don't see any other questions that came in. So if you have any other questions, like I said, feel free to reach out, send us an email at contact. I'm happy to hop on a call and discuss your particular needs for 911 or particular issues or that you're having. Reach out to your account manager or sales rep if as well to we can schedule that call. They'll simply send you a link to our scheduling application, and you can pick a time that works for you, and we'll book a 30-minute call to review your needs and come up with a couple of solutions for you. Please hit our website, sign up, look at some additional webinars that are coming up. If you have any topics for webinars, we're always super happy to take webinar recommendations from our customers on topics and assign them out to our different engineers. So we'd love to hear from you. 911 is one actually was recommended, so we actually redid. I did this one based on a customer recommendation. So if you have something you'd like to see from PBX, contact center, mobile app, whatever it is, feel free to send us an email on the contact at Inflow Communications with a webinar recommendation, and we'll get one scheduled for you. Thank you for your time today, and look forward to seeing you on another webinar in the future.